The dust of a dozen towns clung to Molly Vaughn's worn boots as she stepped off the stagecoach in Fort Collins, Colorado, hoping this place might be different, though she knew better than to hope any more. It was late spring in 1879, and the Rocky Mountains still wore their winter caps of snow while the valley below had turned green with new growth. Molly carried everything she owned in a single carpet bag. Its leather handle, mended so many times the original stitching had disappeared beneath layers of repair. She was 22 years old, though some days she felt ancient, weathered by whispers and sideways glances that followed her like shadows. The stagecoach driver had barely looked at her during the entire journey from Denver. Word traveled fast in the territories, faster than any horse or locomotive, and somehow her story always arrived before she did. The woman who had killed a man, the woman who had shared a bed with him outside of marriage, the woman ruined beyond redemption. Fort Collins was larger than she had expected, with a main street that stretched wide enough for 2 wagons to pass comfortably. Buildings made of brick and timber lined both sides, their false fronts painted in optimistic colors that seemed at odds with the hard reality of frontier life. She could see a general store, a saloon, a land office, and further down, what appeared to be a hotel. The afternoon sun beat down on her shoulders, warming her through the faded calico dress she wore. Molly walked toward the hotel, keeping her eyes forward, chin level. She had learned not to look down, not to show shame for something she would do again if faced with the same choice. A man had tried to take from her what was not his to claim. She had defended herself with the only weapon at hand, a heavy iron skillet that had crushed his skull. The law had called it justified. The people had called her ruined. The hotel lobby smelled of linseed oil and tobacco smoke. Behind the desk stood a woman with steel gray hair pulled into a severe bun, her face lined with the kind of hardness that came from years of judging others and finding them wanting. "I need a room," Molly said, setting her bag down. The woman's eyes traveled from Molly's face to her worn dress to her mended bag. "We are a respectable establishment. I can pay." Molly reached into her pocket and withdrew a small leather purse, counting out coins onto the counter. "1 week in advance." "Where are you from? Does it matter?" The woman's lips pressed into a thin line. "It matters if you are bringing trouble to my establishment. I am bringing nothing but the need for a clean bed and honest work." Molly met her gaze steadily. "I have references if you require them. References can be forged. Then do not rent to me." Molly picked up her coins. "I will find accommodation elsewhere." "Wait." The woman sighed, pulling a ledger from beneath the counter. "Sign here. Room 4, 2nd floor, no visitors, no drinking, no disturbances. Breakfast is served at 7, dinner at 6. You miss it, you go hungry." Molly signed her name in careful script, took the key, and climbed the narrow stairs. The room was small but clean, with a single bed covered in a faded quilt, a washstand with a chipped basin, and a window that overlooked the street. She set her bag on the bed and moved to the window, watching the town move through its daily rhythms below. A wagon loaded with lumber creaked past. 2 women in respectable dresses crossed the street, their heads bent together in conversation. A dog lay sleeping in a patch of shade. And then she saw him. He was tall, lean in the way of men who worked hard for their living, with dark hair that needed cutting and a sun-weathered face that suggested he spent more time outdoors than in. He walked with a slight limp, favoring his left leg, and wore the practical clothes of a ranch hand: denim pants, a chambray shirt, a leather vest dark with age and use. A wide-brimmed hat shaded his face, but even from her window Molly could see he had strong features, a straight nose, a firm jaw. He stopped at the general store, tying his horse to the rail with practiced efficiency. The animal was a handsome chestnut gelding with white socks on its front legs. The man stroked the horse's neck before heading inside, and something about that gentle gesture made Molly's chest tighten unexpectedly. She pulled away from the window, annoyed with herself. Romance was not for women like her. She had learned that lesson thoroughly. The next morning, Molly woke before dawn and dressed in her other calico dress, this one a faded blue that had once been vibrant. She brushed her chestnut hair and pinned it up, then made her way downstairs to the dining room. Only 2 other guests sat at the long table, an older man reading a newspaper and a traveling salesman who eyed her with too much interest. The gray-haired woman from the front desk brought out plates of eggs, bacon, and biscuits without a word of greeting. Molly ate quickly, ignoring the salesman's attempts at conversation, and was back outside before the sun had fully cleared the eastern plains. Fort Collins was waking up. Shopkeepers swept their stoops. The blacksmith's forge already glowed orange in the dim light. Molly walked the length of the main street, looking for help-wanted notices in windows. Most businesses would not hire a woman alone, she knew, but kitchens always needed workers, and laundry was women's work. At the far end of town, she found a restaurant with a small sign in the window. "Cook wanted. Inquire within." The owner was a short, round man with flour in his graying beard and sweat on his brow. His name was Henderson, and he ran the place with his wife, who had taken ill the previous month and could no longer manage the heavy work of cooking. "Can you make biscuits?" he asked, wiping his hands on his apron. "Yes, sir. Roast a chicken, fry steak." "Make gravy that does not taste like paste." "Yes, sir, to all of it." He studied her with shrewd eyes. "You are not from here." "No, sir. I arrived yesterday." Running from something or toward something, Molly hesitated, then decided on truth. "Neither. Just trying to find a place where I can work and live in peace." Henderson nodded slowly. "Fair enough. I pay $3 a week plus meals. You work breakfast and dinner service 6 days a week. Sunday you have off. You show up drunk or late, you are finished. Understood?" "Yes, sir." "When do I start?" "Right now. I have got 20 miners coming in for lunch and my biscuits are hard as rocks." Molly tied on an apron and set to work. The kitchen was hot and cramped, with a massive cast iron stove that radiated heat like a furnace. She made 3 dozen biscuits, fried up steak and potatoes, and kept coffee brewing in the large pot that sat at the back of the stove. When the miners arrived, they ate with the single-minded focus of men who worked underground all day, barely looking up from their plates. Henderson watched her work with approval. "You have done this before." "My mother ran a boarding house in Missouri. I cooked for her guests from the time I was 12. She's still there. She died 4 years ago. Cholera. Sorry to hear it." He paused. "You got family anywhere?" "No, sir." He nodded, asking no more questions, and Molly was grateful for it. She fell into a routine over the following days. Wake before dawn, walk to the restaurant, cook breakfast for whoever wandered in seeking a hot meal. Clean the kitchen, prep for dinner, cook again as the sun went down. Return to the hotel, wash herself at the small basin in her room, fall into exhausted sleep. It was hard work, but honest, and she was good at it. On her 4th day in Fort Collins, the cowboy with the limp came in for breakfast. He sat at a table near the window, removing his hat and setting it on the chair beside him. Up close, she could see his eyes were a striking blue-gray, like storm clouds over the mountains. His face had the kind of rugged handsomeness that came from good bones and a life lived outdoors. He was perhaps 25 or 26, with crow's feet already forming at the corners of his eyes from squinting against the sun. Henderson brought him coffee. "Morning, Adam." "The usual." Yes, sir, and make it quick if you can. I've got to get supplies and head back before noon. Molly, 3 eggs, bacon, biscuits, and gravy for Adam Prescott here. He is the foreman out at the Circle K Ranch, so treat him right. Molly nodded and set to work. She could feel the cowboy's eyes on her as she moved around the kitchen, but his gaze felt different from the salesman's at the hotel, curious rather than predatory. She cracked eggs into the hot skillet, listening to them sizzle, and arranged bacon strips beside them. The biscuits were already made, so she split 4 of them and ladled thick sausage gravy over top. She brought the plate out herself rather than letting Henderson deliver it. Here you are, sir. Adam Prescott looked up at her, and their eyes met. She saw no judgment there, no suspicious narrowing, just a quiet appraisal that ended with a slight smile. Thank you, miss. Smells wonderful. You are welcome. She turned to go, but his voice stopped her. I have not seen you around before. I only arrived a few days ago. From where, if you do not mind me asking? Denver most recently. Before that, other places. He nodded slowly. Well, welcome to Fort Collins. It is a good town for the most part. Good people. Molly did not respond to that. Good people had run her out of 3 towns already. She returned to the kitchen and focused on her work, but she could feel something had shifted, though she could not name what. Adam Prescott came in for breakfast the following week as well, and the week after that. Always the same order, always polite, always with that quiet watchfulness that should have made her nervous, but somehow did not. He never asked personal questions, never pried, just offered a greeting and a thank you and left coins on the table that included a generous tip. Molly learned things about him by listening to Henderson's conversations. The Circle K Ranch was one of the larger spreads in the area, running about 2,000 head of cattle across land that stretched from the foothills to the prairie. Adam had worked there for 5 years, starting as a regular cowhand and working his way up to foreman through a combination of hard work and natural leadership. He had been injured in a stampede 2 years back, when a steer had caught him wrong and crushed his leg. He walked with a limp now, but it did not slow him down much. Good man, Henderson said one afternoon as they cleaned up after the lunch rush. Honest as the day is long, saved his money, planning to buy his own land someday. Could have married 6 girls in this county if he wanted, but he keeps to himself mostly. Molly wondered why Henderson was telling her this, but she did not ask. Summer arrived, bringing heat that baked the streets to dust and turned the mountains hazy in the distance. Molly had been in Fort Collins for 6 weeks, the longest she had stayed anywhere since leaving Missouri. No one had recognized her yet. No whispers followed her down the street. She began to think maybe, just maybe, she could build something resembling a life here. Then Mrs. Carmichael walked into the restaurant. Molly was bringing out a plate of chicken when she saw the woman, dressed in traveling clothes, sitting at a corner table with 2 other ladies. Mrs. Carmichael had lived in the boarding house next to Molly's in Kansas City. She had been there the night everything happened. She had testified at the inquest. Their eyes met across the room. Recognition flared in Mrs. Carmichael's face, followed by something that looked almost like pity. Molly set the plate down with shaking hands and retreated to the kitchen. "You all right?" Henderson asked. "You look like you have seen a ghost." "I am fine. Just the heat." But she was not fine. She waited, counting down the minutes until Mrs. Carmichael would lean across that table and whisper to her companions, until those women would tell their friends, until the whole town would know. It took less than 2 days. Molly was walking back to the hotel after the dinner service when she heard the voices. 2 women stood on the opposite side of the street, making no effort to lower their voices. "I heard she killed a man with her bare hands." A man she was living with in sin. Can you imagine? Perfectly shameful. and Henderson has her cooking food for respectable people. Someone should say something. Molly kept walking, her spine straight, her face calm. She had heard it all before. She would hear it again. The next morning, 3 regular customers did not show up for breakfast. By dinner, 5 more had stopped coming. Henderson said nothing, but she could see the concern in his eyes. By the end of the week, business had dropped by nearly half. "I should leave," Molly said quietly as they cleaned up one evening. "I am hurting your livelihood. You have done nothing wrong." "That does not seem to matter." Henderson was quiet for a long moment. "My wife was pregnant when we got married. Only by a month, but enough that people could count on their fingers and know we had not waited for vows. The way some folks treated her, you would think she had committed murder. Took years before they let it go." He looked at her steadily. "Point is, people love to judge, makes them feel righteous. But it does not make them right." Molly's throat tightened. "Thank you for saying that. I am not firing you. If customers want to eat somewhere else over foolish gossip, that is their choice." But Molly knew how this would end. She had seen it before. The pressure would build until Henderson had no choice but to let her go, or risk losing his business entirely. It was only a matter of time. She was walking to work the next morning when she saw the graffiti. Someone had painted words across the restaurant's front window in crude red letters: "Whore" and "Murderess." Molly stopped in her tracks, staring at the ugly words. Her hands curled into fists. Before she could decide what to do, Henderson came out with a bucket of soapy water and a rag. "Cowards did this in the night," he said, his voice tight with anger. "Help me clean it off before the morning customers see." They scrubbed together in silence. The paint had dried, making it difficult to remove. Molly's arms ached by the time they finally cleared the glass, leaving only faint red shadows behind. "You should let me go," she said softly. "No, Mr. Henderson, no." He looked at her with fierce determination. "I will not reward this kind of cruelty. You are a good worker and a decent person. That is all that matters to me." Molly wanted to argue, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she nodded and went inside to start the biscuits. Adam Prescott came in that afternoon, later than usual. He ordered coffee and sat at his regular table, and Molly brought it out to him. "Thank you." He wrapped his hands around the cup, not drinking, just holding it. "I heard what happened." Molly stiffened. "I see. I wanted you to know I do not put stock in gossip. You do not know what they are saying is untrue. I know enough." He looked up at her, those storm cloud eyes steady and calm. "A woman does not get run out of multiple towns for no reason, but I also know that the reasons people give are not always the truth. Fear makes people cruel. So does righteousness." Molly did not know what to say. She stood there holding her serving tray like a shield, waiting for him to say something else, to ask questions, to probe for details. Instead, he took a sip of his coffee. "This is good, strong the way I like it." "I will tell Mr. Henderson." "Tell him yourself. You make good coffee." It was such a small thing, such an ordinary compliment, but it made Molly's eyes burn with unexpected tears. She turned away quickly before he could see. Over the following days, more customers stopped coming. The restaurant was often empty except for a handful of miners who did not care about gossip and a few ranch hands who needed a hot meal. Henderson's face grew more drawn, more worried. His wife was still sick, the medical bills piling up, and the lost income was clearly hurting them. Molly counted her saved wages one night in her hotel room. She had almost $30 now, enough to buy a stage-coach ticket and start over somewhere else. Somewhere the whispers had not reached yet. The thought made her feel hollow. She was serving breakfast to a lone miner when Adam Prescott walked in. He was not alone. With him were 5 other men, all ranch hands by the look of them, all dusty from riding. They filled 3 tables, talking and laughing, ordering coffee and eggs and everything on the menu. "Thought we would try the food here," Adam said when Molly brought his order. "Heard it was the best in town." "You heard correctly," one of his companions said, a young man with red hair and freckles. "These biscuits are better than my mother's, and I will deny saying so if you tell her." The other men laughed. They ate with appreciation, complimented everything, left generous tips. When they finally departed, the restaurant felt less empty than it had in days. "That was kind of him," Henderson said, watching through the window as the men mounted their horses. "Yes," Molly agreed quietly. Adam started coming in more regularly after that, sometimes alone, sometimes with 1 or 2 ranch hands. Other customers began trickling back, slowly at first, then in greater numbers. Whether it was Adam's influence or simply the passage of time wearing down the scandal, Molly could not say. But within 2 weeks, the restaurant was nearly as busy as it had been before. She thanked him one morning when he came in early, before the other customers arrived. "You did not have to do that. Bring your men here, I mean." Adam shrugged. "We needed to eat somewhere. The food here is good." "It was more than that." He met her eyes. "Maybe, but I did not do it for gratitude. I did it because it was the right thing to do." "Why?" The question escaped before she could stop it. "You do not know me. You do not know what I have done." "I know enough." He paused. "I know you work hard. I know you are kind to Henderson even when you are hurting. I know you hold your head up when people whisper. That tells me more about your character than any piece of gossip ever could." Molly felt something crack open inside her chest, something that had been locked away for so long she had forgotten it was there. Hope, maybe, or the possibility of it. "Thank you," she whispered. "You do not have to thank me for treating you like a human being. That should be the baseline, not something special." He finished his coffee, left coins on the table, and walked out into the morning sun. Molly watched him go, her heart beating faster than it should. After that, she found herself watching for him, listening for the sound of his boots on the restaurant floor, looking up too quickly when the door opened, then trying to hide her disappointment when it was someone else. She told herself it was foolish, dangerous even, to let her guard down. But something about Adam Prescott made her want to try. He asked her to walk with him one Sunday afternoon. She had the day off and was sitting on the hotel's front porch, watching the town go about its weekend business, when he rode up on his chestnut gelding. "Miss Vaughn." He touched the brim of his hat. "I was wondering if you might like some company for a walk. It is a fine day, and there is a creek about a mile out of town with cottonwoods and shade." Molly knew she should say no. Getting close to anyone was a mistake, but the words that came out were different. "I would like that." He helped her up onto his horse, and they rode slowly out of town, following a dirt road that wound through grassland dotted with wildflowers. The mountains rose in the west, their peaks still touched with snow despite the summer heat. The air smelled of sage and sun-warmed earth. The creek was exactly as he had described it. A ribbon of clear water running over smooth stones, bordered by tall cottonwoods that rustled in the breeze. Adam helped her down from the horse and they walked along the bank, not touching, maintaining a respectable distance. "How long have you been in Colorado?" Molly asked. 7 years. Came out from Ohio after my parents died. Figured I would try my hand at ranch work, see if I liked it." "And do you?" "Most days," he smiled. "It is hard work, but honest. I like being outside working with the cattle and horses. The men respect me, the owner trusts me, cannot ask for much more than that. Henderson said you are saving to buy your own land." "That is the plan. There is a section up in the foothills that might come available soon. Owner is getting old, thinking of moving to Denver to be with his daughter. If I can get together enough money, I might make him an offer." They walked in comfortable silence for a while. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermals. Grasshoppers jumped out of their path. "Can I ask you something?" Adam said finally. Molly tensed. "You can ask. The things people say about you, are they true?" She stopped walking, looking at the water instead of at him. "Which things?" "That you killed a man." "Yes, that is true." "Will you tell me what happened?" Molly closed her eyes. She had told this story before to lawmen and judges and juries, but never to someone whose opinion mattered to her, never to someone she wanted to think well of her. "I was working as a cook in Kansas City. There was a man, older, who owned a freight business. He started coming around, bringing me small gifts, saying nice things. I was lonely. My mother had just died and I had no one, so when he asked if he could court me, I said yes." The words came slowly, painfully. "After a few months, he said he wanted to marry me, but his business was struggling and he could not afford a proper wedding yet. He asked if I would come live with him, just temporarily, until he could get back on his feet. He promised we would marry as soon as he had the money." Adam said nothing, just listened. "I was foolish enough to believe him. I moved into his house. People talked, but I did not care. I thought we would be married soon and then it would not matter." She laughed bitterly. "He had no intention of marrying me. He just wanted someone to cook and clean and warm his bed. When I finally realized it, I told him I was leaving. He said I could not. Said no decent man would have me now, so I might as well stay with him." Her hands were shaking. She clasped them together. "That night he came home drunk. I was packing my things. He tried to stop me, tried to force me to stay. When I fought back, he hit me, knocked me to the floor. Then he started tearing at my clothes, saying if I was going to act like a whore, he would treat me like one." Adam's jaw had gone tight, but he remained silent. "There was a skillet on the stove. I grabbed it and hit him, just once but hard. He fell and did not get up." Molly's voice had gone flat, emotionless. "I ran for help. When the doctor came, he said the man was dead, fractured skull, and then there was an inquest. The doctor testified about my injuries. Neighbors testified that they had heard him shouting, heard me screaming. The judge ruled it self-defense. But it did not matter. In everyone's eyes, I was ruined. A woman who had lived with a man outside of marriage. A woman who had killed. They ran me out of Kansas City. I went to 3 other towns, found work in each, and each time someone recognized me or heard the story. Each time I had to leave." She finally looked at Adam. "So yes, the things they say are true. I did kill a man. I did live with him in sin. I am everything they whisper about." Adam was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "No, you are not. You do not. You are a woman who defended herself from a man who tried to rape you. You are a woman who survived. You are a woman who keeps going even when the whole world wants to tear you down." His voice was fierce. "That does not make you ruined, it makes you brave." Molly felt tears spill down her cheeks. No one had ever called her brave. Ruined, fallen, shameful, yes, but never brave. "I do not feel brave. Brave people rarely do." He reached out, gently wiping a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "They just keep going because there is no other choice." She wanted to lean into his touch, to let herself believe that maybe she could have him, but fear held her back. "You should not be seen with me. It will hurt your reputation." "I do not care about that. You should. People respect you. They listen to you. If you associate with me, then they will see that I judge people by their character, not by gossip." He stepped closer. "Molly, I am not asking you to make any decisions right now. I am just asking if I can keep walking with you, keep getting to know you, see where this goes." "Why would you want to?" "Because when I look at you, I see someone strong and resilient and kind despite every reason not to be. I see someone who makes the best biscuits in Colorado." He smiled slightly. "And I see someone I would very much like to spend more time with." Molly could not speak past the lump in her throat. She nodded instead, and Adam's smile widened. They walked for another hour, talking about small things. His work at the ranch, her childhood in Missouri, the way the mountains looked in different light, the sound of the creek flowing over stones. It was ordinary and extraordinary all at once. When he brought her back to town, he helped her down from the horse with careful courtesy. "Can I see you again?" he asked. "I would like that." "Next Sunday?" "Yes." He touched his hat brim and rode away, and Molly stood on the porch watching until he disappeared from sight. Over the following weeks, Sunday became the day she lived for. Adam would ride into town, and they would walk together, sometimes to the creek, sometimes up into the foothills where wildflowers painted the meadows in purple and gold. They talked about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up in Ohio, about his parents who had died in a fire, about his decision to come west and start over. She told him about her mother's boarding house, about learning to cook, about the dreams she had once had of opening her own restaurant. "You still could," Adam said one afternoon as they sat beneath a cottonwood, watching clouds drift across the sky. "I do not have the money. You could save it, take a few years, but you could do it. No one would come, not to a restaurant owned by a woman like me. I would come, every day." He plucked a blade of grass, twisting it between his fingers. "And I think you would be surprised. People have short memories. Give them time and they will forget to be scandalized. You are more optimistic than I am. Maybe, or maybe I just have faith in you." She looked at him, this man who had chosen to see her as brave instead of ruined, and felt something shift inside her. Something that felt dangerously like love. They did not speak of it, did not name it, but it was there in the way he looked at her, in the way she found excuses to touch his hand, in the way their conversation stretched longer, neither wanting the day to end. Henderson noticed. "That Prescott fellow is sweet on you." Molly felt her cheeks heat. "He is just being kind. Kind as bringing you flowers once. Coming to see you every week for 3 months is something else entirely." Henderson gave her a knowing look. "He is a good man. You could do worse. I could do nothing. That would be safer for both of us. Safer, maybe, but is safe what you want?" Molly did not answer because she knew the truth. Safe was not what she wanted. She wanted Adam's smile and his steady presence and the way he made her feel like she could be more than her past. But wanting and having were different things. Summer faded into early autumn. The aspens in the mountains turned gold, their leaves shimmering like coins in the breeze. The air grew crisp in the mornings, though the afternoons were still warm. Molly had been in Fort Collins for 5 months, longer than she had stayed anywhere since leaving Missouri. Adam asked her to dinner at the hotel restaurant one Saturday evening. It was a public declaration, she knew, a statement that he was courting her openly, regardless of what people might say. She wore her best dress, a green calico she had made herself, and pinned her hair up with the carved wooden combs her mother had given her. When Adam arrived to collect her, dressed in clean trousers and a white shirt, his hair neatly combed, her breath caught. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. "You look very handsome yourself." They walked to the hotel together, and Molly could feel eyes on them. Whispers followed in their wake. But Adam offered her his arm, and she took it, and they walked into the dining room with their heads held high. The meal was simple but well prepared. Roast beef, potatoes, carrots, fresh bread. They talked easily, the conversation flowing like the creek they walked beside on Sundays. Adam told her about a difficult calf birth he had overseen that week. She told him about Henderson's wife finally recovering enough to come back to the restaurant for a few hours each day. "I am glad she is better," Adam said, "but I hope you will not leave now that she is well." "I have no plans to leave," Molly paused, "unless people start causing trouble again. They would have to go through me first. The fierceness in his voice made her smile. "My protector. If you will let me be." Their eyes met across the table, and Molly felt the weight of the moment, the question he was really asking. "I am not an easy person to care about," she said quietly. "My past follows me. People will always whisper. Let them whisper. It could hurt you, your position, your reputation." "Molly." He reached across the table, taking her hand. "I do not care. I have spent the last 5 months getting to know you, the real you, not the version gossips create. And what I have found is the strongest, bravest, most remarkable woman I have ever met. If people want to judge me for seeing that, for wanting to be with you, then they are not people whose opinions I value. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you wake up before dawn every day to make biscuits. I know you are patient with difficult customers. I know you saved half your wages to send to Henderson when his wife was sick, even though you could barely afford it yourself. I know you love the mountains and hate the heat, and you hum when you think no one is listening." He squeezed her hand. "I know that when I am with you, I feel more like myself than I have in years. Is that not enough to build on?" Molly's vision blurred with tears. "What if I disappoint you?" "What if you do not?" He smiled gently. "We could spend our whole lives afraid of what might go wrong, or we could take a chance on what might go right." She thought about all the towns she had passed through, all the new starts that had ended in whispers and shame. All the time she had convinced herself she was better off alone. And then she thought about Sunday afternoons by the creek, about the way Adam looked at her like she was something precious, about the possibility of building something real with someone who saw her for who she truly was. "All right," she whispered. "Let us take a chance." Adam's smile was brighter than the lamplight. He raised her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles with tender reverence. Around them, the dining room continued its evening rhythm, but Molly felt like they were the only two people in the world. They courted properly after that. Adam came to town every Sunday, and sometimes on Wednesdays if he could spare the time. They walked and talked and slowly, carefully, built something between them. He kissed her for the first time in late October, beneath a cottonwood tree with golden leaves falling around them like rain. It was gentle and sweet and filled with promise. "I am falling in love with you," he said against her lips. "I am falling in love with you too," she admitted. Winter came early that year. Snow fell in November, blanketing Fort Collins in white and turning the mountains into something from a painting. The restaurant stayed busy with people seeking hot food and warm coffee. Adam came less frequently, the ranch work demanding more of his time as they moved cattle to lower pastures and prepared for the harsh months ahead. But he wrote her letters. Long, detailed letters about his days, his thoughts, his dreams for the future. Molly treasured each one, reading them by lamplight in her hotel room and writing back with equal care. In one letter, he told her the land he wanted was definitely coming available in the spring. The owner had agreed to sell to him for a fair price, payments spread over 5 years. In another, he described the house he planned to build with a big kitchen and windows facing the mountains. He did not say it outright, but the implication was clear. He was building a future, and he wanted her in it. Christmas came, and Adam surprised her by riding into town on Christmas Eve despite the snow. He brought her a gift wrapped in brown paper, a beautiful shawl made of soft wool dyed deep blue. "I ordered it from Denver," he said as she held it up, running her fingers over the fine weave. "The woman at the mercantile said it was the color of your eyes. It is too much. It is not nearly enough." He took the shawl from her hands and draped it around her shoulders. "Molly, I know we have not been courting long, and I know you have reasons to be cautious. But I need you to know that I am serious about you, about us. I am serious too, serious enough to consider a future with me." Her heart hammered against her ribs. What kind of future? The kind where you wake up in that house I am building. Where you cook in that big kitchen because you want to, not because you have to. Where we build a life together, you and me, and to hell with anyone who has a problem with it. He cupped her face in his hands. I want to marry you, Molly. Not today, not tomorrow, but someday soon. I want you to know that is where my heart is heading. Molly felt tears slip down her cheeks. I want that too, so much it scares me. Then be scared with me. We will figure it out together. She kissed him then, pouring all her hope and fear and love into it. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Adam rested his forehead against hers. I will make you happy, he promised. I will spend every day trying. You already make me happy. They spent Christmas together, walking through the snow-covered town, attending the Christmas service at the small church, sharing a meal at the restaurant where Henderson had cooked a feast. It was the best Christmas Molly had known since her mother died. The winter seemed to last forever, but finally, spring arrived. The snow melted, the creek ran high with runoff, and the mountains shrugged off their white coats to reveal gray stone and green forest. Adam finalized the purchase of his land and began building his house with help from his ranch hands. Molly went to see it one Sunday in April. The house was still just a frame, walls half raised, roof beams exposed to the sky. But she could see the shape of it, the promise of it. Kitchen will be here, Adam said, walking her through the skeleton structure. Big windows on this side so you can see the mountains while you work. Bedroom there, sitting room here, and out back I thought maybe a vegetable garden. It is going to be beautiful. It will be home. He pulled her close. Our home, if you will have it. Are you asking me to marry you? I am asking if you will say yes when I do ask properly with a ring and everything. He smiled. I want to do this right, Molly. I want to give you the courtship you deserve, the proposal you deserve, the wedding you deserve. No shortcuts, no compromises. You have been given too little respect in your life. I aim to change that. Molly felt overwhelmed by the enormity of his love, the depth of his commitment. I do not need grand gestures. Maybe not. But you deserve them anyway. The house went up quickly with so many hands helping. By late May, it had walls and a roof and windows. By June, it had a floor and a stove and furniture Adam had ordered from Denver. It was a fine house, sturdy and well built, with that big kitchen he had promised and windows that framed the mountains perfectly. He proposed on a Sunday in July, exactly 1 year after their first walk to the creek. He got down on one knee beside the cottonwood tree, holding a simple gold band. Molly Vaughn, you are the bravest person I know. You are strong and kind and beautiful, and I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. Will you marry me? Will you build a life with me in that house up in the foothills? Will you let me spend the rest of my days trying to make you as happy as you make me? Yes, she said, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes to all of it. He slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her deeply. The cottonwood leaves rustled overhead, and somewhere a meadowlark sang, and Molly felt like she had finally found her way home. They were married in August, in the small church in Fort Collins. Henderson and his wife attended, along with Adam's ranch hands and a surprising number of townspeople who had come to respect Molly over the past year. The ceremony was simple, but heartfelt. Molly wore a new dress of cream-colored silk, and Adam wore his best suit, and when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the congregation actually applauded. The reception was held at the restaurant, Henderson insisting on providing the food as his wedding gift. There was music and dancing and more happiness than Molly had thought possible. Even the hotel owner, the stern woman who had questioned Molly's respectability when she first arrived, came to wish them well. I judged you unfairly, she said quietly. I am sorry for that." "Thank you for saying so," Molly replied, meaning it. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Adam swept Molly into a dance. They moved together easily, naturally, as if they had been doing this for years instead of hours. "Happy?" he asked. "Happier than I have ever been." "Good. I plan to keep you that way." They rode up to their new house as the stars came out, the horse picking its way carefully along the darkened road. Adam carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing at the tradition, and set her down gently in the kitchen. "Welcome home, Mrs. Prescott." "I like the sound of that." They made love for the first time that night, in the bedroom with the mountain view, and it was nothing like Molly's previous experience. Adam was gentle and patient, asking what she liked, moving slowly, making sure she felt safe and cherished. When she cried afterward, he held her close and stroked her hair and told her he loved her, would always love her, would spend his life proving it. They settled into married life with surprising ease. Molly continued working at the restaurant part-time, enjoying the work but no longer dependent on it for survival. Adam worked the ranch during the day and came home to her each evening. They talked and laughed and built routines together. Sunday walks to the creek, Saturday mornings sleeping late. Wednesday evenings sitting on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. In October, Molly realized she was pregnant. She told Adam over dinner, watching nervously for his reaction. His face went through a series of expressions: surprise, joy, wonder, and finally a fierce protectiveness that made her eyes sting with tears. "We are going to have a baby," he said, as if testing the words. "We are." He came around the table and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "I love you. I love you so much. I love you too." The pregnancy was not easy. Molly was sick for the first few months, barely able to keep food down. But Adam was endlessly patient, bringing her crackers and weak tea, rubbing her back when she was ill, reassuring her that everything would be fine. As winter set in, her belly grew round. Adam would rest his hand there in the evenings, feeling the baby move, his face filled with such wonder it made Molly's heart ache. "Do you think it is a boy or a girl?" he asked one night. "I do not know. Does it matter to you? Not even a little. Healthy is all I care about." The baby came in early April, during a late spring snowstorm. The midwife arrived just in time, helping Molly through hours of difficult labor. Adam stayed by her side the whole time, holding her hand, whispering encouragement, refusing to leave even when the midwife suggested he might be more comfortable elsewhere. Their son was born just after dawn, screaming his outrage at the cold world. He had dark hair like his father and a strong, healthy cry that filled the house with sound. "He is perfect," Adam said, tears streaming down his face as he held the tiny bundle. "Molly, he is perfect." They named him James after Adam's father. He was a good baby, easy-tempered and quick to smile. Adam was a devoted father, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor with James when he was fussy, singing off key lullabies that made Molly laugh. Life settled into a new rhythm. Molly stopped working at the restaurant, focusing instead on caring for James and managing their home. Adam took on more responsibility at the ranch, his pay increasing along with his reputation as a fair and capable foreman. They were happy in a way Molly had never imagined possible. When James was 6 months old, they took him into town for the first time since his birth. People stopped them on the street to admire the baby, to congratulate them, to chat about ordinary things. No one mentioned Molly's past. No one whispered or pointed. She had simply become Mrs. Prescott, Adam's wife, James's mother, a respectable woman with a respectable life. "They forgot," she said wonderingly that night as they prepared for bed. Or they decided it did not matter anymore, Adam replied. People change their minds when you give them enough time and reason. You were right, about all of it. I usually am. He grinned when she swatted his arm. But I will admit, I did not know for certain. I just had faith it would work out. Faith in what? In you. In us. In the idea that good things can happen if you are brave enough to reach for them. Molly kissed him softly. Thank you for calling me brave when everyone else called me ruined. You were always brave. I just recognized it. The years passed sweetly. James grew into a bright, curious toddler with his father's blue-gray eyes and his mother's stubborn determination. When he was 2, Molly became pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, and in the spring of 1883 she gave birth to a daughter they named Clara. Clara was tiny and delicate, with auburn curls and a sunny disposition. Adam doted on her shamelessly, carrying her everywhere, making faces to hear her giggle. James was a protective big brother, always watching over his sister with serious attention. Adam saved enough money to buy out his contract with the Circle K Ranch and focus entirely on his own land. He expanded their herd gradually, building a reputation for quality cattle. The ranch prospered, and with it, their family. They added rooms to the house, a nursery for Clara, a bigger bedroom for James. Adam built a barn and a chicken coop and fenced-in pastures. Molly planted the vegetable garden he had promised her, growing tomatoes and beans and squash. On Sundays, they still walked to the creek, now with children in tow, James splashing in the shallows while Clara napped in her mother's arms. Henderson retired from the restaurant when his wife's health declined, selling it to a young couple from Kansas. He and his wife moved into a small house near Molly and Adam's ranch, and the families remained close. Henderson loved to spoil James and Clara, carving them wooden toys and telling them exaggerated stories about their mother's excellent cooking. She made biscuits so good, people would ride 20 miles just for a taste, he would say, winking at Molly. Now you are just making things up, she would reply, but she smiled as she said it. In 1885, when James was 4 and Clara was 2, Molly surprised Adam with news of a third pregnancy. This time she carried twins, a boy and a girl they named Samuel and Rose. The birth was difficult and the midwife was worried, but both babies arrived healthy and screaming. Adam held them both at once, tears streaming down his face, marveling at the miracle of it. 4 children, he said in wonder. Molly, we have 4 children. I noticed, she replied dryly, exhausted but happy. The house that had seemed so spacious now rang with noise and laughter. Children ran through the rooms, played in the yard, helped with small chores. Adam hired ranch hands to help with the growing workload, and their operation expanded further. They were not rich, but they were comfortable, secure, happy. Molly sometimes thought about the woman she had been when she first arrived in Fort Collins. Alone, afraid, convinced she would never have anything more than the next job, the next town, the next escape. That woman seemed like someone from another lifetime now. She was 30 years old, mother of 4, wife to a man who loved her without reservation. She had a home, a family, a place where she belonged. The whispers that had once followed her had faded into nothing. She was simply Molly Prescott, and that was enough. One evening, when the children were all asleep and the house was finally quiet, Adam found her standing at the kitchen window, looking out at the mountains silhouetted against the darkening sky. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "How different my life is now, how different I am. You are not so different, still the bravest person I know." Molly leaned back against him. "I would not have survived without you." "Yes, you would have. You survived before you met me. You would have kept surviving." He kissed the top of her head, But I am glad you did not have to. I am glad you let me be part of your life. I am glad too." They stood there in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one. Somewhere in the house, one of the twins started crying, then stopped, probably soothed back to sleep by their older siblings. The sound of their family, alive and well and thriving. "You ever regret it?" Molly asked quietly. "Taking a chance on me, dealing with all the gossip and judgment?" "Not for 1 second." Adam turned her to face him. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me. You and our children, this life we built. I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Even the part where everyone in town thought you were crazy for courting a ruined woman, especially that part. Because they were wrong and I got to prove it." He smiled. "Well, you proved it. I just gave you the chance." Molly kissed him, deep and lingering, pouring a decade of gratitude and love into it. When they pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "I love you, Adam Prescott." "I love you, Molly Prescott. Always have, always will." The years continued their steady march. The children grew. James became a responsible young man who loved working with the cattle. Clara developed a talent for horses and could ride better than most adults by the time she was 10. Samuel was quiet and thoughtful, always reading. Rose was fearless and funny, keeping everyone laughing with her antics. Adam's hair started to gray at the temples. Molly found laugh lines around her eyes. Their hands became work-worn, their bodies marked by the years of labor. But they were happy, deeply and genuinely happy, in a way that only comes from building something real together. When James turned 18, Adam officially made him a partner in the ranch. The young man had earned it through years of hard work and dedication. They celebrated with a family dinner, all 6 of them crowded around the kitchen table, talking and laughing and planning for the future. "I want to expand the northern pastures," James said, his eyes bright with ambition. "There is good grazing land up there that we are not using." "That is a smart idea," Adam agreed. "We can start planning it out tomorrow." Molly watched her son, no longer a child but a capable young man, and felt a surge of pride. He had grown up secure and loved, never knowing the kind of shame and judgment she had endured. That alone felt like a victory. Clara announced at 15 that she wanted to train horses professionally. Adam built her a proper training ring, and within 2 years, she had a reputation throughout the county for her skill. People brought her their difficult horses, and she worked magic with them, patient and persistent and gifted. Samuel surprised everyone by becoming a teacher. He studied at night, passed the examinations, and took a position at the Fort Collins School. Rose, true to form, declared she was going to open a dress shop and proceeded to teach herself to sew with single-minded determination. Their children were finding their own paths, building their own dreams, and Molly and Adam gave them the support and freedom to do it. They had learned from their own experiences that forcing people into boxes never worked. Love and trust were better foundations. In 1895, Henderson passed away peacefully in his sleep. His wife followed him 6 months later. Molly grieved for the man who had given her a chance when no one else would, who had seen her worth when others saw only scandal. They buried him on a hill overlooking the valley, with a simple stone that read, "A good man who treated everyone fairly." At the funeral, Molly spoke about how Henderson had changed her life, how his kindness had given her hope when she had none. Many in the crowd were younger people who had not been in Fort Collins during Molly's early days. They listened with interest to the story of the disgraced woman who had found redemption and love. Afterward, several people approached her with tears in their eyes, thanking her for sharing her story. One young woman, barely 20, whispered that she had made mistakes too and had been afraid she would never recover from them. Molly's story gave her hope. "You can recover," Molly told her gently. It takes time and courage, but you can build a new life. Do not let other people's judgment define you. The young woman hugged her, and Molly felt the circle complete itself. She had been that frightened girl once. Now she could offer the encouragement she wished someone had given her. In 1900, as the new century dawned, James married a sweet-natured girl named Emma from a neighboring ranch. The wedding was large and joyous, with half the county in attendance. Adam walked the bride down the aisle since her own father had passed, and when he returned to sit beside Molly, his eyes were damp. "Our boy is married," he whispered. "We are getting old," she whispered back. "Speak for yourself." "I am still in my prime." She stifled a laugh, and he squeezed her hand, and they watched their son begin his own journey into married life. Clara married 2 years later to a rancher's son who shared her love of horses. Samuel courted the schoolteacher who had mentored him, and they had a quiet wedding in the spring. Rose, ever unpredictable, eloped with a merchant from Denver, sending a telegram that said simply, "Married, very happy, home soon. Love, Rose." Adam laughed until he cried when he read it. "That is our daughter, all right." "At least she is happy," Molly said, though she wished Rose had let them attend the wedding. The house that had once been so full of children grew quiet again. But it was not a sad quiet. It was peaceful, settled, the quiet of a life well lived. Molly and Adam had time for each other again, for long conversations and lazy mornings and walks to the creek that had witnessed their love story begin. Grandchildren arrived. James and Emma had 3 sons in quick succession. Clara had twin daughters. Samuel and his wife had a daughter and a son. Rose sent letters from Denver about her baby boy, promising to visit soon. Molly loved being a grandmother, spoiling the little ones in ways she had never spoiled her own children. Adam built them a swing set behind the house and carved wooden animals for them to play with. Sunday dinners became grand affairs, with multiple generations crowded around the table, talking over each other, laughing, arguing, loving. In 1910, when Molly was 53 and Adam was 56, they took a trip to Denver to visit Rose and her family. It was the first time they had left the ranch for more than a day in years. They stayed for a week, marveling at how much the city had grown, how different it was from the frontier they remembered. But they were both glad to return home, to their mountains and their land and the life they had built. Cities were fine for visiting, but this was where they belonged. Adam's limp had gotten worse over the years, arthritis settling into the old injury. He moved slower, needed a cane sometimes, but he never complained. He still worked the ranch every day, though he left more of the heavy labor to James and the hired hands. Molly's hair had gone completely silver, and her hands ached on cold mornings, but she still tended her garden and cooked big meals when the family gathered. She still hummed while she worked, the same tuneless melodies Adam had noticed all those years ago. They grew old together, gently and gracefully, surrounded by the fruits of their labor and love. One evening in the summer of 1915, they sat on the porch watching the sunset, as they had done thousands of times before. The sky was painted in brilliant oranges and pinks, the mountains dark silhouettes against the fading light. "You remember the first time I asked you to walk with me?" Adam said suddenly, "Of course I remember. I was sitting on the hotel porch and you rode up on that chestnut gelding. I was so nervous, I thought you might say no. I almost did, I was afraid. But you said yes anyway." He took her hand, his fingers interlacing with hers in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "Best decision I ever made asking you. Best decision you ever made saying yes. We made a lot of good decisions together. We did." He was quiet for a moment. "I want you to know something, Molly. These past 36 years with you have been the happiest of my life. Every single day with you has been a gift. I do not regret a moment of it." Molly felt tears prick her eyes. "Why are you talking like this?" "I am not sad, just grateful. I wanted you to know." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I am grateful, too, for you, for our children, for this life. I never thought I could have any of it. And then you called me brave instead of ruined, and everything changed. You were always brave. I just had the good sense to see it." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear, one by one, in the darkening sky. The same stars that had watched them fall in love, that had shone on their wedding night, that had witnessed every joy and sorrow of their shared life. Inside the house, they could hear the sounds of family. James and Emma had brought the grandchildren for dinner, and the little ones were still running around, burning off energy before bed. Their laughter drifted through the open windows, sweet and clear. "Listen to that," Adam said softly. "That is the sound of a life well lived." "It is," Molly agreed. "It really is." The years that followed were gentle ones. Adam finally retired completely from ranch work, leaving the operation in James's capable hands. He spent his days carving toys for the grandchildren, reading, and sitting on the porch with Molly. They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary in 1919, with all 4 children and countless grandchildren in attendance. It was a joyous occasion, filled with stories and laughter and love. Molly had never forgotten where she came from, the darkness she had walked through to find this light. Sometimes, when a new family moved to town or when she heard whispers of someone struggling with scandal, she would reach out, offer a kind word, a listening ear. Sometimes practical help in the form of a job recommendation or a loan. "You cannot save everyone," Adam told her gently after she had spent an afternoon consoling a young woman whose engagement had been broken off. "No, but I can help some, and that matters." He kissed her forehead. "You have the biggest heart of anyone I have ever known. I just remember what it felt like to be alone and afraid. If I can keep someone else from feeling that way, I will." In 1922, Adam's health began to decline. The doctors said his heart was weak, worn out from a lifetime of hard work and the accumulated stresses of age. He took the news calmly, with the same steady acceptance he had shown in everything else. "I have had 69 good years," he told Molly when she cried. "And the last 43 with you have been extraordinary. I am not afraid. I am afraid. I do not know how to be without you." "Yes, you do. You are the strongest person I know, remember." He wiped her tears with gentle fingers. "You will be all right. You have our children, our grandchildren. You have a full life. You will grieve, but you will be all right." He lasted through the winter and into the spring. On a warm April morning, with Molly holding his hand and all 4 children gathered around his bed, Adam Prescott took his last breath and slipped away peacefully. Molly felt like part of her soul had been torn away. The grief was enormous, overwhelming, a physical pain that made it hard to breathe, but she did not break. Adam had been right. She was strong, and she had a family who loved her, who supported her, who needed her. They buried him on the hill next to Henderson, with a stone that read, "Adam Prescott, 1853–1922. Beloved husband, father, grandfather, he saw the best in everyone." Molly visited the grave every week, bringing fresh flowers from her garden, talking to him about the children and grandchildren, about the ranch, about her days. It helped somehow to maintain that connection. She lived for another 8 years, watching her grandchildren grow into adults, welcoming great-grandchildren into the world. She remained active and engaged, still cooking big Sunday dinners, still tending her garden, still offering wisdom and comfort to those who needed it. In the spring of 1930, at the age of 73, Molly began to feel tired in a way that went beyond the normal weariness of age. She knew somehow, that her time was coming. She gathered her children around her and made sure all her affairs were in order. She had already divided her few possessions among them, had written letters for each grandchild, had said everything that needed saying. On a Sunday afternoon in May, sitting on the porch of the house Adam had built for her, surrounded by the mountains they had both loved, Molly Vaughn Prescott closed her eyes and did not open them again. They buried her next to Adam, under a stone that read, Molly Vaughn Prescott, 1857–1930. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, she was braver than she knew. The family gathered after the funeral, sharing stories and memories. James talked about how his mother had always made him feel capable and loved. Clara spoke of her mother's quiet strength and unwavering support. Samuel remembered her kindness to everyone, regardless of their circumstances. Rose, through tears, recalled her mother's laughter and her refusal to let anyone dim her light. The grandchildren shared their own memories, of biscuits made with love, of gentle hands braiding hair, of wisdom offered without judgment, of a woman who had faced the worst the world could offer and had chosen to respond with grace and courage. As the sun set over the mountains that evening, the family stood together on the hill where Molly and Adam rested side by side. The wind rustled through the grass, carrying the scent of wildflowers and sage. Somewhere in the valley, a meadowlark sang its evening song. James placed a hand on his mother's headstone. She made it, he said quietly. After everything she went through, all the judgment and cruelty, she built a beautiful life. She won. They both did, Clara added, touching her father's stone. They found each other when they both needed it most, and they built something that lasted. And it continues to last, Samuel said, gesturing to the assembled family. Look at all of us. We are their legacy. Their love created all of this. Rose, always the most emotional, was crying openly. I hope they knew how much we loved them, how grateful we are. They knew, Emma, James's wife, said gently. How could they not? It was evident in everything we did, everything we said. As darkness fell, the family made their way back down the hill, back to the house that Molly and Adam had filled with so much love. The lights glowed warm in the windows. Inside, great-grandchildren played and laughed, too young to fully understand loss but old enough to sense that something important had ended, but something else continued. The love that Molly and Adam had built did not end with their deaths. It lived on in their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. It lived on in the ranch that still operated, in the house that still stood, in the stories that were passed down through generations. Years later, a young woman who was going through her own struggles came to visit James, now an old man himself. She had heard stories about his mother, about the woman who had been called ruined but who had built a life of dignity and love anyway. She wanted to know if the stories were true. James, thinking of his mother's strength and his father's unwavering faith in her, smiled. Every word, he said. My mother was the bravest person I ever knew, and my father saw that in her when no one else could. He called her brave instead of ruined, and that changed everything. Do you think someone could do that today? The young woman asked, hope and fear warring in her voice. Build a new life after everyone has judged them. James looked at her with the same kind, steady gaze his father had once turned on his mother. I know they can. It takes courage, and it takes finding the right people who will see you for who you really are. But yes, absolutely. My parents proved that, and you can too. The young woman left with tears in her eyes, but also with hope. And in that moment, Molly and Adam's legacy continued, touching yet another life, spreading the message that redemption is possible, that love can heal, that courage matters. The house in the foothills stood for many more decades, eventually becoming a historical landmark. People came to see it, to hear the story of Molly and Adam Prescott, the woman who had been called ruined and the cowboy who had seen her truth. Their love story became part of the folklore of Fort Collins, passed down and embellished with each telling. But at its heart, the truth remained simple and powerful. A woman arrived in town, carrying the weight of judgment and shame. A man chose to see past the whispers to the strength beneath. They fell in love. They built a life. They created a legacy that lasted far beyond their mortal years. In every town she had passed before Fort Collins, they had called her ruined. But one cowboy, in one moment of clarity and courage, had called her brave instead. And that single act of recognition, that choice to see her truth rather than believe the lies, had changed everything. It had given her the chance to build the life she deserved, to love and be loved, to raise children and grandchildren to matter. Adam had given her that chance, but Molly had taken it. She had been brave enough to accept his love, to build a new life, to face down the whispers and the judgment and the fear. Together, they had proven that the past does not have to define the future, that redemption is real, and that love, true love, can heal even the deepest wounds. Their story became a testament to the power of seeing people for who they truly are, not who others claim them to be. It stood as proof that a single voice of support can change a life. That calling someone brave when the world calls them ruined can make all the difference. And so the legacy lived on, in the children and grandchildren, in the house on the hill, in the stories told and retold. Molly Vaughn Prescott had been called many things in her life, but in the end, the only label that mattered was the one Adam had given her from the very beginning: brave. She had been brave, and she had been loved, and that, in the end, was everything.